thank you so much for your attention, and I hope that we were able to pick something from the video. So to further highlight IFAD's strategic approach and some examples of its work, especially in East and Southern Africa, I have a panel of speakers, and I'll briefly now introduce them. So the session for the speakers is going to be led by Ms. Sarah Mbagu Bunu, the Regional Director for East and Southern Africa at IFAD. We will also have Ms. Patsina Chileshe, the Regional Climate and Environmental Specialist. And then we'll have Mr. Custodio Mukavele, the Country Program Officer for IFAD in Mozambique. We also have Mr. Moses Abukari, the EU Regional Manager at IFAD, based in Kenya, Nairobi. And then we also have Mr. Salah Simon, who is the Senior Technical Specialist, Information and Communication Technologies for Development, ICT 4D at IFAD. So we'll now go into our first session to be presented by Ms. Sarah Mbagu Bunu. Good morning, Sarah. We're excited to have you share some experiences about IFAD's work in this Food and Investment Forum. Good afternoon, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Brian. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Sarah, Africa's food systems have been greatly affected by key development challenges such as climate change and inequality, as we saw in the video. And more recently, we have the COVID-19 pandemic. So what is IFAD doing to promote recovery and rebuilding to ensure sustainable food systems?
Thank you for that very important question, Brian. I think recovery and rebuilding it can only be done through investments in innovation in our food economy. As you know, investments in resilient food systems is essential to the recovery and building back better for not only the African continent, but indeed the whole planet. The global food economy examines both the human and ecological cost of what we eat. And this is why it's so important to crowd in the investments in there. The current food economy is characterized by immense contradictions. Transnational companies dominate the market in food and benefits from subsidies, whilst farmers in the global south remain impoverished. 65% of poor working adults rely on agriculture for their livelihoods in 2016, data says. And also, according to the data in 2017, farming generates about 68% of rural incomes in Africa and about half of rural incomes in South Asia. Under current trends, analysis shows that food systems in Ethiopia, Malawi, Mozambique, Tanzania, Uganda, and Zambia will provide more than 70% of total jobs by 2025. So this really means that we need to be able to boost this sector and to crowd in innovations, particularly around small and medium enterprises, because they are at the heart of delivering transformation in our food systems. So the role of smallholder farmers cannot be overemphasized here, and it's time we recognize that the 500 smallholder farmers globally do not only produce food for the world, but in fact, they're also producing essential environmental services, such as pollination, soil fertility management, groundwater management. They're stewards of biodiversity. And I think governments and just the population at large needs to recognize the service that they provide us within the food system and incentivize them for that. Right now, we only pay them for the food they produce, but underestimate their role in the environmental service side of things. Now, in part of recovering back better, we know that there is actually an investment gap that is much needed to promote technology use, leverage digital solutions, reduce loss in food, develop necessary logistics, and crowd in the investments to reach the Sustainable Development Goals 1 and 2. So traditional funding sources cannot meet the 320 billion gap alone, and there's need to scale investments from both public, private, and philanthropic sources. So now IFAD, like other financial institutions, is challenged to introduce new financing mechanisms, such as public-private partnerships, deploy more blend finance instruments, introduce financing based on results, also explore capital markets to look at thematic bonds, and even deploy and start accessing tools like crowdfunding in order to actually bridge the resources that we need for transformation. And looking at this, to date, most of the development banks around the world, including commercial and local national banks, only invest 1% of their total portfolios in agriculture. So there's a real problem with de-risking. Imagine all the 450 public development banks that exist. They basically have an amount of 2 trillion annually, but only 1% goes in there. So we have the challenge to convince the private sector and other actors that there's opportunities in ag and try to come up with innovative ways to de-risk that. And I think this session is an excellent way to demonstrate what that could be like, looking at possibilities for AgFin, leveraging AgTech, looking at digital solutions that build resilience, not only to pests and disease, but also looking at nutrition profiles, giving us big data to enable smallholder farmers to actually understand their risks in terms of climate, understand their risk in terms of water stress, in all types of things. So I think these innovations is what we need to finance. And finally, I don't want to end this session by saying right now we have faced with triple crisis, the crisis definitely of climate, which is ongoing, but also COVID. COVID is there, and it has had multiple impacts. It has demand shocks, so there's a decline in income and a decline in demand. It's disrupted the food supply, so food prices are skyrocketing, and availability of food is actually at risk. We see this translating into worsening nutrition and rising hunger. And we also see, the sources of other sources of funds like remittances hard hit as well. And this whole has a catalytic effect of reducing farmer access to agricultural inputs, SMEs not able to meet their financial responsibilities to cover for staff and operational costs. And in general, it leads to big fiscal distress, and the spiral goes on. So we want to be able to build back better by building back and investing in resilience. And we hope that this session and the colleagues and speakers who come in here will share some of the IFAD experiences in doing so. Over and out to you, Brian.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that very wonderful overview, and also for setting the tone for this very interesting debate we're having today. And indeed, like you have highlighted, the role of smallholder farmers cannot be overemphasized, and the need for us to crowd in private sector to ensure they are supported and to ensure that we can bridge the financing gap that is there. And it is indeed really interesting that we're going to hear more about the specific examples of what IFAD is doing in this space. Thank you so much. And at this particular point in time, then we move to our second presentation. And this will be made by Paxina Chileshe, who's this regional climate and environment specialist at IFAD. Good afternoon, Paxina.
Good afternoon, Brian.
Thank you so much, and we're happy to have you during this session. Can you please share with us some of IFAD's investments towards climate change goals for resilience across the agriculture sector in Africa?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to share some of IFAD's work, and good afternoon to everyone. I just want to start by talking about the three main avenues that IFAD is actually using in combating and supporting smallholder farmers, as Sarah has emphasized, in the role that they play in our food production, but also maintaining our agricultural and productive landscape. So climate change in IFAD, we have three approaches, looking at ensuring that the investments are climate focused. So we are all well aware that climate change events, such as the droughts in Southern Africa, which are increasing in intensity in some areas and also frequency. We have floods in other areas like here in East Africa in the recent past that have also damaged infrastructure and livelihoods for smallholder farmers. We also have pests and diseases, the incidence of the locusts that have infested several of the African countries. And we're also looking at the issues of exacerbating land degradation, which all have a negative impact on agricultural productivity, and hence the livelihoods of the smallholders, but also the food production systems. So in IFAD, we have a commitment of 25% of our portfolio being climate focused. And this, as a result, we have over the last 2 years, approvals of projects that will ensure $148 million equivalent is actually invested in climate change adaptation measures. And I'll come to some of those measures a little bit later. This investment will build on our Adaptation for Smallholder Agriculture program, through which IFAD and other partners, using development partners and the climate finance, have invested $69 million in supporting smallholders to build their resilience. The second element is a rural resilience program, which under IFAD, we have 3 pillars under this program. One of them is an enhanced version of an enhanced phase of our Adaptation for Smallholder Agriculture program, which is targeting to mobilize resources of $500 million to be able to support smallholder production. And this will also be in addition to the 3S initiative and also the Great Green Wall initiative, which also focus on some of the Sahel countries and other countries within Eastern and Southern Africa. The third element, IFAD is an accredited entity for the Green Climate Fund, an implementing agency also for the Global Environment Facility and also the Adaptation Fund. And through these international funds that also focus on climate and environment, we are also supporting countries to be able to access resources and be able to make the necessary investment in smallholder agriculture. So where do these investments go? So the investments are mainly in, of course, supporting smallholders to build their resilience. And as mentioned by Sarah, they play an important role in managing the agricultural landscape. So we support them in climate smart agriculture. And this looks at the 3 elements of climate smart agriculture. So the adaptation to climate change, mitigation, so low emission agricultural production, and also key for the smallholders, the improved productivity. So the investments are, for example, climate information services, catchment and farmland conservation to improve soil and water management, but also to be able to use better our green water resources. In terms of the blue water, we also have water infrastructure investments and improved use efficiency of these water resources. We are also making investment in climate resilient infrastructure, whether it is post-harvest, so for storage facilities and also processing facilities, but also in terms of irrigation facilities and also the road network. In terms of climate change mitigation, we also have improved animal husbandry and feedstock management. And we also support farmers with technologies such as shade cloth and drip irrigation and drought tolerant seed varieties. So those are some of the examples of some of the work that IFAD is doing in support of smallholder agricultural production and productivity. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you so much, Paxina, for that wonderful presentation as well. And glad that you've highlighted the opportunities as well in terms of upscaling some of the climate smart agriculture technologies that IFAD has been supporting. Of course, also emphasizing the need for further investment, as was highlighted by the first presentation by Sarah. So thank you so much. And at this particular point in time, then we move to our third presentation. And this presentation will be made by Mr. Custodio Mukavele, who is the Country Program Officer for IFAD in Mozambique. Good afternoon, Custodio, and welcome to this session.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So glad to have you. So as we start your presentation, Custodio, can you please share with us how we can leverage digital technologies to promote recovery and resilience in Mozambique?
Well, thanks, Brian, and thanks to the organizers for giving us opportunity to share experience on how IFAD support contributes to leveraging digital solutions to promote recovery and resilience in Mozambique. Well, to respond to your question, I would like to illustrate it through a plant protection practice. We call it plant clinics. This is because one of the major challenges of the agriculture sector in Mozambique is low productivity. And this is due to a combined effect of low access to inputs, extension service, but above all, high incidence of pests and disease in the major crops. Therefore, we believe that plant clinics are helpful in addressing at least the plant protection aspects of the productivity equation. Now, what is plant clinics? Talking about plant clinics is talking on a searchable open access database containing fact sheets, management advice, and other information on problems of plant health affecting the major crops. Therefore, and in practice, plant clinics are part of extension service. They are in location accessible to the farmers, and they are run by plant doctors. They diagnose plant health problems and give appropriate and timely advice. And they are supported by a plant-wise knowledge bank. Now, what is the e-plant clinics? What is I'm going to introduce now, which is plant clinics basically is e-plant clinics actually is a version of plant clinics which use digital platforms. It consists of using tablets, using tablets that are equipped with GPS and camera, and a set of database with a knowledge bank and fact sheets that provides technical support to diagnostic exercise in the field. With e-plant clinics, the whole exercise of diagnosis until providing feedback to the farmers takes around 2 to 3 hours, depending on the complexity of the pathology and on the flexibility and experience of the plant daughter. So we believe this is important to give timely protection to crops against different disease, and it gives a contribution to productivity, better incomes, and it gives more resilience to our communities. What are the major benefits that we see from e-plant clinics? As I indicated earlier, one is the speed in decision making. You have information in terms of diagnosis and appropriate advice in less than 2 hours. That is important in terms of preventing economic damages. It is an iterative plant clinic. It's an iterative plant clinic web page that includes synergies. In the tablets, we have synergies with early warning systems, which gives us an opportunity to link with FAO, and that's an opportunity to provide synergies with RBAs. It is also a very useful method of working in the prevailing situation of COVID-19 by preventing crowds, mobility, and physical contacts between people. However, there are things that we think that needs to be improved. That includes good monitoring and evaluation system of plant clinics. In particular, the elements of adoption rates. The speed of feedback to the farmers, it's also another element that we think that can be improved, including the accuracy of information. It's not good when the extension people and plant daughters read inaccurately. They can provide a wrong diagnosis, which can be damaging, not only for the environment, but also economic-wise to the farmers, and that needs to be avoided. And last but not least, continuous training to both farmers and extension officers, it's needed. I think at this stage, Brian, I will stop here. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Custodio, also for sharing the innovation about the plant clinics and how that has eased the provision of technical advice and extension services in Mozambique. And happy that you also mentioned that there is also open collaboration, not only with the national government, but also with Rome-based agencies, the other UN agencies like FAO. So hopefully, if there are any follow-up questions to that, we do encourage people to share their comments on the chat, and we should be able to allow the speaker to be able to respond to whatever question you have. And then for those that were not able to hear the video clearly, you can please later on after the session, you can listen to the video on the virtual booth, and the sound there is perfect, and you can listen to it. So Custodio, thank you so much for that presentation. We now move to our next presentation, and this will be done by Mr. Moses Bukari, who is the EU Program Manager for IFAD based in Nairobi, in Kenya. So welcome to the session, and good afternoon, Moses.
Yeah, good afternoon, Brian, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, welcome. So Moses, please, can you share with us how is IFAD using a combination of digital solutions to promote recovery, rebuilding, and resilience in Kenya, especially in the face of COVID-19 now?
Yeah, thank you very much, Brian. And I'm going to share IFAD innovation that we use in input delivery to e-voucher system in Kenya, as Sarah mentioned, in terms of building resilient public-private producer partnership, which is a project that is co-financed by IFAD and European Union, which has been going on for some years now. So basically, this e-voucher delivery was to build upon a government paper-based e-voucher delivery system. And the whole idea was, from the beginning, was to make sure that farmers become resilient commercial farmers. And that means that we wanted to expose them to a suite of a bundle of services instead of single services. And here we make sure that targeting farmers who wanted to give them something more concrete, where they were able to also be part of the inclusion, financial inclusion of it. And the whole idea was to work with the private sector and not to crowd them out, but to crowd them in, where we think that sustainability of any intervention revolves around private sector services and farmers having access to it. So with the card, we have two, as you can see on the screen, we have two different brand of card that provided, but the card itself is segmented and customized based on what is required. So we have 6 e-wallet. One is farmers account, where
Moses, we seem to be losing you. Are you there?
Yes, hello, Brian, I'm here. Hello, yeah, Brian, can you hear me?
We had lost you for a bit. Please proceed.
Okay, sorry.
Yes,
so
yes.
I'm said that this is segmented to 6 e-wallet. We have farmers account, conservation agriculture, seeds, which is composed of 5 crops, and we have fertilizer, basically, which means agrochemicals, which so far farmers have been able to access over 13,000 tons of agrochemicals. 99% of them is fertilizer. And then we have crop insurance, where farmers are compensated with in terms of any yield, and this is based on area yield index insurance. And the last but not the least, we have post-harvest items where farmers have given tarpaulins and hermetic bag to store their input. And here in the image are 2 farmers. One on the left is Sharon, and then here is Samuel, who are both young people who are producing, cultivating in this program. And then good thing is that Samuel, whom I met at the beginning of this year, said, I mean, he's a youth, but he wants to also demonstrate that farming is there's dignity in farming. So that's why he's able to wear this suit, just to encourage more young people and to not to go into to the cities or migrate to other areas. But more importantly, out of this e-voucher, we've been able to different assorted input from this different e-wallet that I've mentioned to the tune of over 15 million, which is channeled through the agro-dealer and conservation agriculture service network in 13 counties in the country. So this is basically stimulating a lot of businesses for farmers and young people. And one thing that we can see that we found in the field is that most of the agro-dealers are young people and women. And also for the conservation agriculture, we have majority of them being young people providing these services. But as Sarah mentioned, what the goal is to make sure that we graduate farmers into resilient commercial model. And it's a complex process, but we try to simplify it through this view of chart. So here I want to mention something we call the 3 T's. So the first T is about targeting. So we want to make sure that we target different farmers. So Samuel and Sharon are what we call subsistence farmers. They barely produce to eat, but because of the project, we are able to enroll them and give them a lot of opportunities, training, and give them access to better market. And then each of them have a different pathway where we want to make sure that they become more sustainable at the end of the day, either as commercial farmers or work in different groups of it. And here, this is the pathway that you can see where each of them at this stage, we all of them want to, that's the end goal we want to reach out to. So for Samuel, he is already around this pathway in the sense that what the impact is having, that from the crops, the input that he has been able to assess, he's able to multiply at least the crop that he's able to grow to get a yield of about 5 times from compared to what he was producing. And he's able to sell because we've provided market infrastructure and storage infrastructure where he has better linkages to farmers. And what we believe that the strong aspect is the resilience. And resilience also has different pathway, which we think that credit is also an important element of it. And here, what I want to talk about, the second T, is about transparency, making sure that everything is well clear and followed correctly. So the input is based on the needs of the farmers. And of course, traceability, whatever transaction is happening at different levels is traceable and can be audited. And then the fourth T is what we call transformation. And here the transformation have different pathways where for the farmers, one, I want to talk about the financial transformation. And basically, with the training and with the access they have enrolled in this project, they've been able to get loans to the tune of around 13 million from banks. And 33% of this loan, they use it to invest in farm assets. And for instance, for Samuel, the last time we spoke to him, his goal is to make sure that the loan that he gets, he invests in small-scale irrigation on his farm and expand upon his acreage and be able to build, to grow more crops, to be able to access market and transform his life. And of course, they also save on it, do saving through the card. And here, as Sarah mentioned, currently we have over 18,000 of the farmers accessing digital financial services. And then we also have agro dealers who also follow the same thing. And then, of course, market, which is extremely important because of the input they produce. So with the project, we support them with warehouses, storage facilities, and they've been able to link to over 40 buyers. And out of the volume of about 50,000 metric tons of grains that have been marketed, I think the value is about over $16 million. And this is where we think that is helping the farmers to be able to build their resilience to become more commercial. And what has happened is that overall government has come up in scaling up this opportunity. So out of the 13 counties, they want to go to nationwide. And then, of course, expanding the commodities to include livestock and fisheries. And the target is to reach 100 million smallholder farmers. And it's part of the ongoing reform that not public subsidy input delivery, but through the private sector. And with this, the government has made sure this is captured as part of the agriculture growth and transformation strategy. And with the e-voucher, it's also part of the government digital strategy that has been developed with the partners. And I think I want to add that partnership is extremely important. And here we're working with the World Bank and AGRA and different actors in this value chain to support them. And ultimately, we hope that with this kind of process, we want to make sure that the farmers, once they become sustainable and resilient, they'll be able to have access to what we call farmer input output assets index. So we want to also understand in terms of the ratio out of the services, how much they can get, either through extension, both public and private, and agro dealer, which for us is in this context is they become extremely important because they are also serving as a bank agent where through the mobile banking service, they also provide services to farmers, and of course, conservation agriculture, which for now we see an opportunity where this people can invest because some of them do not have equipment to be able to provide the needed mechanized services to the farmers. So, Brian, this is what I want to share, and thank you for the attention.
Thank you so much, Moses, for that nice presentation and also for highlighting just how the mandate of making sure that we crowd in private sector to improve the productivity and the economies in the rural sector, what IFAD is doing in Kenya. That is indeed a good presentation, and we hope that we can interact more on that one. So we have our final presentation, and this final presentation is coming from Salah Simon. Good afternoon, Salah, and welcome to the session.
So I'm trying to share my screen.
Okay, all right. No, thank you so much, Salah. As you're doing that, I would maybe you can kick off your presentation by answering this question. Can you please share with us what are some of the major policy constraints to promote investment in innovation for the transformation of food systems across Africa?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And I'll be afterwards if we cannot share the screen. So this is a great question because it provides me with the opportunity to explain why we developed our ICT4D strategy, the ICT4 development strategy, and why we are updating our innovation strategy. We realized that there are a number of barriers, a number of constraints that prevent policy to happen, especially in this nexus of digital innovation and agriculture, which is what we need to transform food systems in general, in particular in Africa. For many reasons, this is relevant for Africa. So among the key policy constraints that we have first of all like a limited disaggregated data related to the technology access, to the use of such technologies among rural people, particularly vulnerable groups. And what does it mean? For a policymaker, it means that if you have data related to the use and the access, it's quite difficult to think about and plan policies that are trying to respond to those needs. Secondly, limited evidence related to the large-scale impact of innovation in agriculture, digital technology, especially in agriculture. So even in that case, by putting myself in the shoes of a policymakers, it means that without the adequate evidence of what works and what doesn't work in these new areas, even if I know what are the needs of the people I'm trying to serve, it's quite difficult for me to plan adequate policies that respond and strategies that respond to. Third barrier, the lack of a comprehensive investment framework for digital agriculture, innovation in agriculture. So at present, we do have investment frameworks in digital health, for example, e-government, where we can pretty much see the cost benefit of developing a new strategy for this sector. It's something that we don't have yet when it comes to digital agriculture and innovation related to agriculture, especially the frontier innovations. Finally, last but not least, when we look at the structure of institutions, we do recognize that on one hand, we have a siloed approach when it comes to the innovation and the ICT that are typically hosted by institutions like telecommunication ministries, etc., and agriculture. So there is like a siloed approach that doesn't allow in most cases, these two institutions, these two groups of institutions within governments to interact with each other. And on the other hand, overall, we have limited capacity when it comes to this specific nexus of innovation, digital technologies, and agriculture among policymakers. And I wouldn't say it's policymakers' fault, meaning that it's a new sector, it's a new field. We are all trying to learn out of this experimentation going on. So I would say there is still a limited capacity that constitutes a barrier. And when it comes to IFAD, we did a stock-taking exercise in the past few years, trying to map what exists and what doesn't exist, which are the gaps when it comes exactly to these points. And that's why we decided to develop an ICT4D strategy, an ICT4 development strategy that would have enabled us to serve better our partners when it comes to digital agriculture, innovation, etc., and to work smarter. So to be able to deliver scaled up development results, expand our impact with lower resources, lower use of resources. So we developed a theory of change and a set of principles that will be guiding our work. And I wanted to stress that one of our key principles is development selectivity, which is that we do see technology and innovation as an enabler of development. So we don't see technology as an end, but rather as a means to be able to reach the development impact we care about, which is particularly increasing productive capacities of people, expanding the benefits from market participation, and strengthening the environmental sustainability and resilience of rural households. Finally, one last piece of information I wanted to share with you is that our ICT4 development strategy has 4 key action areas. One pertains specifically to the scalable uptake of proven ICT for development solutions, particularly those providing information on markets, weather, access to services, and financial inclusion. And when it comes to this action area, one of the things that we would like to do is exactly to identify the barriers that governments and institutions have in leveraging on these technologies and being able to develop adequate strategies for them to overcome. So I know it's a learning process for our partners. I know it's a learning process for ourselves as an institution. But what we would really like to do is to identify those barriers, identify the enabling factors, and being able to develop adequate strategies to help our partners to work on, and take advantage of those technologies. I guess this is it, and it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Salah, for that wonderful presentation, for sharing some of the policy constraints and some recommendations of how we can address them as we are supporting the development of sustainable food systems in Africa. And indeed, we can note from your presentation that IT plays an important part in that. So I would like to thank everyone for having taken time to listen to the session by IFAD, Investment in Innovation for the Sustainability of Food Systems. And we can see from the wonderful presentations that we had that in line with the IFAD mission of transforming rural economies and food systems, we have done quite a number of work from the climate space to IT and also to agriculture and climate agriculture smart technologies on the ground. So like we heard from the presentations from Sarah and from the colleagues, smallholder farmers play an important role in the sustainability of food systems in Africa. However, they are constrained by a number of challenges, including climate change, low investment, and the recent development challenges such as COVID-19. And so the only solution, like we heard from the presentations, is to ensure that whatever they are doing is in collaboration with the private sector, which is why now strategies of how to crowd in the private sector are really important. And we saw specific examples of climate smart agriculture interventions that are being done. And one thing that is worth noting is that in the recent report that was published by IFAD and CPI, only 2% of the climate finance reaches smallholder farmers. And so we need to increase that. And the only way we can increase that is by making sure that we invest in more innovations that will help to improve the productivity. The last presentation that was done by Salah here presents the fact that our work around policy is the only way that we can guarantee sustainability of what we're doing. And so it's by helping governments identify the policy gaps and also the opportunities that may be there for us to be able to invest in Africa's food systems. So thank you so much for joining. You can find more information about IFAD on our website. And I would like to thank all the panelists for the wonderful presentations that we had. Thank you so much all, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.